Okay, so I get off track very easily. I have found out. And I should actually just be talking about these 11 ideas here because these are the sort of juxtaposition or whatever of how these work and how they don't work is where the debate and the discussion should lie. Okay, we reject authoritarian education. It's not even education because when you look at the learning pyramid, you see that lectures only they only retain 5% of a lecture. So you know your Julie Chancellors and your JCPS of lecture, lecture, lecture. Your Xavier universities or your colleges or graduate schools, lecture, lecture, lecture. I'm only learning 5% of your words. You know, if do fun activities. The fun activities I remember few and far between, but we did this like socio-economical thing with Amanda Wyrick, and we would take one step in if we were not privileged and one step back if we were privileged, and it was interesting to see how the different things actually worked out. In fact, actually, the first question was, were your ancestors, did they come across the boats, and were they slaves? And I'm 11% black, and so I could have actually took a step forward, but I didn't do it because it was kind of like, oh, I'm not trying to take that sort of like, I'm not trying to say like I'm black, so therefore like I had that sort of. But that is true. 11% of me is black, so that means I had some ancestor that came across it on the Atlantic slave trade. But it doesn't matter. The socioeconomic thing, I like the map. I like kind of seeing how there's one white kid that he just kept getting farther and farther back. Basically, he was the most privileged person you've ever had. And you know, of course, those kids are going to succeed. They already got it all. They have, you know, loving families that want to support them. They don't need to come to school and actually get educated. They just need to come to school, say whatever little bit that they need to say, and then walk out. And of course, everything is going to be okay. He wore flip-flops, didn't seem like he would be struggling whatsoever. But anytime I would speak up, he'd be the first one against me. Anyways, so that thing, that socio-economical sort of map or whatever you want to call it, that was a very interesting thing. We played this war game, I remember, with Brandy Frisbee in Mr. Miller's class, and I guess any extracurricular thing. As I remember going on Science Olympiad, and I did this paper airplane thing, and I was able to keep the paper airplane floating for as long as I could. My mother actually bought me this paper airplane book, and it was wonderful because it worked out, and I had the best thing, and I wound up getting the gold medal, the only person that got the gold medal. So I was able to get, you know, the #1 thing at the Science Olympiad. But the war game was interesting because it was innately political, and so there was me versus Brandy Frisbee, and then all the other countries were all set up and differently. John Preston had and Peevis, Ryan Peevis. So you had, John Preston had a group, and then David Miller was part of my class, and so he was sort of influential. But Brandy Frisbee's a woman. Then you had Wyatt Eggleston, and then she had offered some sort of trade route. You get trade routes if you fight for me. And then Wyatt was like, well, I'm going to get trade routes with him. What am I going to get with you? And then I said, well, I'll get you land or something. I don't know. But it went on for like 2 or 3 days, and we were talking about it in between the days about England, what are we going to do? And then, and so eventually I was able to convince, daggone it, I've talked to him several times beforehand, but basically we got into an argument. It's crazy, actually, like, because of the obedience of the teachers, I don't really know my classmates that well, and it didn't seem like they really wanted to know me. They had liked me or have heard of me, or that was new and that was exciting. Daggone it, what was his name? This is bad, but anyways, I was able to convince one of the men to actually kind of turn on Brandy, and they said, can he do that? Well, it's war, of course you can do that. So he had stood up, it was Richard Search's friend. Richard Search's friend is Yealy, Jeremy Yealy. So Jeremy Yealy, he had stood up and he goes, I am going to go with, and then he turned to me and he was like, Jonathan Masters, right? And so he sided on my side, right? So he was going to go with Brandy, but he turned. He had said that he was going to be with her, but he turned and went on me, and that was the turning route. And so eventually I had enough people. John Preston had already set up that he was going to go against me, but he kind of miscalculated. He shouldn't have participated in this war. He should have waited this war out and then attacked after the war had happened, after everybody kind of blew each other up. But he sided with the losers, and then they had been wiped out, and then we were able to divide the land up. And so there was going to be another war that was going to be set up because there wasn't enough land. I promised everybody land, so there wasn't enough land for everybody to go around. And so I looked at the other people, and I said, what about that neutral country? Let's attack them. And actually, we should have just attacked them and took the country and took the land, but I was actually going to back off. I was going to let him declare the war, and then I was going to back off on it and let, sort of defend him. How dare you? But I should have done that. I should have actually, he was the key He was the main reason why I had won the thing, the politics, the whole organization, the conversation. It was just really fun. And plus I won, right? So that makes it even more fun. There was another political game that I played with Timothy White in college, and it was sort of a political game very similar to this, but it was we were divided into, well, actually, there's no groups. We could group together if we wanted to, but essentially, everybody had so many resources, and you could bid to take like new resources. So there was a limited amount of resources, and they could be given out. Now, when you bid, once you bid, you lost that money no matter what. So if you got it, then you'd keep it. But if you didn't get it, you still lost all that money. So it actually, the stakes were raised because it was like, dang, I've already lost this, so might as well just put it all in. And so that was an interesting political game to show how we have finite resources, how in a war you use resources, and then once you've used that resources, to get more, that's all you got. And how that had actually, I got actually wiped out on that, basically because I was a sacrificial lamb, but I was a part of this group of 3, and we had won the first bidding war, and so we had got all this power, and then we started to win some more, and then somebody else had bid over it, so they looked at our team and they said, well, it was you who bid, right? I was like, yeah, sure, it was all me. And so I just went ahead and took the loss for everybody. And then eventually this big group of about 10 people had unionized, and they wound up winning the whole thing. But it was the one woman who had unionized all of them, and so since she was the main leader, she had got all the resources, and she won, right? So basically the union, that big union had lost. So that the conversations, the ideas that all come with that, it was absolutely incredible. But in terms of real education, there has been nothing productive, nothing good, and that I can actually say that has come with my education. And it's disappointing because I'm a fairly smart person, and I know that they've introduced a lot of topics. I'll give them that. But in terms of actually, like, we never built a house, we never actually helped anybody raise them up out of poverty, we never, nothing. Actually, nothing in real life. It's all academic. It's just all academic, projects that is irrelevant. Oh, that's academic. That's why they say that, right? So the different schools here: black schools, Waldorf, Reggio Emilia, Montessori, Stoner Hill, Sudbury. I'm just going to actually run down just real quick, just to kind of say what I think of each one of them. So black schools, I think it can be a fun, exciting place. There's politics in the classroom. The greater society is going to get you, so you got to be as strong as possible. In fact, that's like Jean-Jacques Rousseau. You need to protect your babies, mothers, protect your babies. The society is going to try to conquer them and manipulate them, exploit them, protect them and make them strong. If you make them strong, you'll make them good. And if you make them a leader, they can help pull us all out, of this misery. Waldorf schools, I just found out that it was religious, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Waldorf. And I don't want to give each one of these because I don't think they all deserve an entire video, but maybe I have to, okay? Self-education is kind of self-explanatory, but you have like Benjamin Franklin, you have Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Frederick Douglass, and really anybody that's achieved anything on their own were self-educated. Self-education is the most powerful form of education. Isaac Asimov, he has said that all education is self-education. There's no such thing as not self-education, right? So that actually kind of says when you're sitting there and you're taking 5% of all the lectures, you're not learning anything. If anything, the only thing that you're being educated is that you're a worthless nobody that has to sit in that chair and take it like like you're being raped, right? You're being mind raped. You're sitting there, you're taking that, in that chair, you're only learning 5% of it, you can barely think of anything else, you can't go nowhere else, you can't walk here or there, you can't talk to your friends, you're not allowed to communicate or dialogue with anybody else, you can't move out anywhere else, so you're in prison and you're being mind raped, and that's what they're doing in these schools, they're mind raping you. So self-education, in fact, I actually heard Karen Dunnigan use that as sort of a weapon against the students. Like, yeah, no, it is. I can sit there and lecture at you for 3 hours, but really it's all about you going home and reading the books and then coming out and telling us what had happened. That's all this no, the classroom experience is part of the self-education, okay? So self-education, if I want to learn how to, we got the internet, we're in the age of information, so if I want to learn how to change a tire, if I want to learn, I remember changing my brake pads because I learned it off the internet, right? I just looked at the book, you take the pieces off, you put them right back the way you took them off, you put the new pads on, done, right? Easy. You can learn anything that way. I was learning about the hemp industry, and so I learned a lot of products. I was able to talk about hemp for about 6 or 7 videos or so. And I still got a history of hemp, and now actually I'm just talking to the blind possum, and he kind of told me that CBDs are not that, special. So I was learning that CBDs had solved all these other things, but really it's sort of a snake oil thing, right? So it's snake oil. They're not actually selling us the product. They're trying to block the legalization of marijuana, so they do that by saying, hey, why don't we legalize this thing that has no effects whatsoever. Now, CBD, I heard THC and CBD sort of has some synergetic, sort of, they combine and they become more powerful. 1 + 1 = 3. That's synergy, right? And so when they combine, they actually sort of work off of one another. They're able to get stronger. Some strands of marijuana have very little THC and lots of CBD, and they're saying that this CBD is actually the key that makes cancer cells go down. So Kentucky almost legalized medical marijuana, but then they did not. Okay, they almost legalized it, but then they didn't. And because of Julie Denton's, Senate Bill 120. So I got to research and look into that. Yeah, so, okay, go on. So let's see, more Waldorf. I want to talk about Waldorf a little bit. That's going to be my main focus on this. Hopefully I can only do like 20 minutes of it anyway. So Waldorf, I compare Waldorf with Summerhill and Sudbury, okay? Summerhill and Sudbury are my dream colleges. Oh my God, Summerhill School, watch the movie. Summerhill is incredible. There's some things that get on my skin, but really it's the kids running, but still you got the oppressors, you got the cool kids, the president thinks that they made a political decision about chalking. They said chalking was littering, right? They had a rule against littering, but they didn't have a rule against chalking. And so he was mad. The president, right, of the council, got mad at some kids. Don't you dare chalk. And, and they was like, well, why not? We're not doing anything. But he's like, well, I'm the boss, and I get to tell people what to do because I got power. And then he voted on it. So they turned chalking into littering. Chalk washes away in the rain, okay? Chalking doesn't hurt anybody. Chalking is not littering. But they voted on it, and he had the power, and he was able to wipe it out. So, with the Constitution and with the postmodern school for revolutionaries, we're going to have a Constitution. We're going to have 5 branches of government: the media branch, the election branch, judicial, executive, and legislative. So we actually had 2 branches of government, and the judicial branch is just so powerful. You just look at our own society. Cops arrest you, you go before the judge, they throw you in jail. That's really, that's all the power. The judicial branch has every bit of power. They judge whether or not you followed the law or didn't follow the law, and really what laws are they following. There is no one document that people are following. They're picking and choosing. There's so many laws out there. People can basically arrest you for any reason whatsoever. Okay, I know a cop is like, well, I'm going to pull him over. Well, don't you have a reason? Well, I'll come up with a reason. Great society we have, right? Oh, they were swerving, right? Or were they swerving bad, or was it like, were they swerving with the curves, right? The curve went left and then the curve went right. Oh, you were swerving. If I didn't swerve, I'd, but so that's, they can pick and choose the laws, and so if there's not one central governed document, then where are any of these morals coming from? Basically, it's the ruling classes. In Kentucky, it's all about the courthouses. You got 120 counties, and the ruling cliques are the ones who control the courthouses. Whoever controls that courthouse is the one who controls everything. So the judges, the police, the entire judicial branch has got the most power. The ones who write the laws, they have some power, but either they don't understand their power or they aren't using it very, very well. And then you got the executive branch. The executive branch are the ones that execute the laws, right? So by execute, they execute the new laws, but they also sort of tell the cops and the judges, this is the new law, this is what's up. Well, I'm the executive branch. And so the executive branch that's the power, right? That would be the man. That's who has all the power. But so, yeah, that's Summerhill, Sudbury schools are incredible because they're pure democracies. And actually, they compared, I remember a good critique against Waldorf and Sudbury was that Waldorf offers a little bit of freedom, sort of Montessori too. Montessori, is for children. I'll use actually Montessori a little bit better because Waldorf, I just understand the idea. They want to stretch you without breaking you. So you get to actually do your own thing, but you have to do something, right? So they'll push you as long as you're going in some type of direction, whereas Summerhill Sudbury says it's absolute freedom. Whatever you want, just freedom, freedom, freedom. It's a little bit dangerous just to be like, do whatever you want to do, because at the end of the day, I think that you have to produce something. You have to say, well, I learned and I studied this, and this is what I got from this. So do whatever you want to do, but at the end, have some sort of write-up or some sort of saying what you learned. What did you learn today? Well, I learned how to be a lazy, just sat around and played video games all day. Well, was that fun? Was that good? Did you learn anything? So there is some degree of just actually finding your own inner peace and not being messed with. to some degree, but eventually you want your students to be active and productive, and you want them doing things, okay? They don't necessarily have to be geared up to making a job or making money, but they got to be doing something, okay? You can't just let them waste away. That Clifford Rogers guy, he went around, shooting everybody, and he was playing video games all the time. Like that was his life. And then he was saying he was being outcasted even in the video games. So the Summerhill, I think Sudbury, they can be a little bit irresponsible in the sense that just complete freedom, which sounds wonderful and great, and it is wonderful and great, but what's the difference between a Summerhill education and just sitting around your house and being, not homeschooled, but just allowed, just being a spoiled kid and allowing your parents to let you do whatever you want to do. So I think it doesn't have to be structured, do what I say to do or anything like that, but I do think there needs to be part of the process, part of the operations, and you have to produce something. Waldorf, the way I understood it, was that they will push you towards the direction, but they won't break you. Now, I also learned that it was religious, so maybe I'm getting a little bit away from Waldorf. Montessori, let's use Montessori as an example. So, with the Montessori education, they'll have like 5 different stations for each kid to come in. As soon as they walk in, they have 5 different stations, right? So they can learn about dinosaurs, they can learn about math, they got to learn something. They got to pick one of the 5 stations. Now, they didn't know about it, so really it's kind of like Jean-Jacques Rousseau was like, yeah, you give them freedom when they're kids, but really you're the adult, you can kind of set the whole thing up. What poor babies, what a bunch of babies, the poor children. You're giving them freedom, but you can kind of like, push and pull different things and sort of still have your way and manipulate them. And in a way, like, I believe in positive reinforcement. So if I have a child and I surround them with a bunch of doctor stuff all of its life, I give it a stethoscope for Christmas and have them listen to heartbeats and give people checkups and check people's health and stuff, they will become a doctor. They will become a doctor. So yes, I want the kids to do whatever they want to do, but at the same time, I can heavily influence what it is that they are able to do. So there's some people say that it has, your own education comes from inside. Well, then some other theorist says it's all about your environment. Piaget, Vygotsky, and B.F. Skinner, even though the behavioralist B.F. Skinner says it's all about your environment. So change the environment, you change the person. So if you have an environment where there's a bunch of doctor stuff, doctor books, doctor movies, doctor equipment, you have friends with doctors, you go to the hospital, you ask questions when you're there, you talk to them about being doctors, those kids will be a doctor. They will love being a doctor. They will love the attention that they get when you're talking about the doctor stuff. So Montessori, they set up 5 different stations, and they feel like they choose, right? They walk into the room, oh, I want to do this station, and they go to that station and they do the thing. And because they choose that station, they actually learn. But that's because they don't know that they're being manipulated. And that's what the guy who was defending Summerhill's like sort of ultimate complete freedom, he was sitting there saying, if you go to a school that offers the illusion of freedom, but they're actually being manipulated, well, that sets them up for being manipulated for the rest of their lives. They won't be able to tell what is real freedom and what isn't real freedom. They won't be able to tell. And that actually, that blew my mind. So I would err on the side of complete freedom. Now, the complete freedom, I think you are still restrained. This is another Jean-Jacques Rousseau type of control tactic by the resources. So if there's no money, if people don't have running water or food and they can't operate the school goes under, and who cares about your little silly experiment, right? Francisco Ferrer y Guardia, it failed after he was in prison for a year. And then they tried to start some over here, and then it never got anywhere. So, what was the point? What was the point of sitting there starting a Summerhill school where you have complete freedom? At the very least, yeah, you would like for, I guess, the resources to have no bearing whatsoever. In my dream school, we just had millions of dollars, plenty of acres, plenty of resources, plenty of tools and materials that anybody could use, and people could do whatever they wanted to do. But that's my dream school. That's if like we were just absolutely millionaires or whatever, never had to worry about anything. Yes, absolutely. But if we're not millionaires, then that means we are limited to, resources, and people have to pay some sort of tuition when they come in. The teachers, if you want high quality teachers, we have to pay the teachers at least a livable wage, right? I would work at a job if I could just pay my bills, just at the very least. I don't need a JCPS $55,000 a year just to, autocratically manipulate. So compared, to the traditional education with Montessori and Waldorf just sails way beyond. So the illusion of freedom, well, not really the illusion. I mean, the Montessori is for children. So children, they have the illusion of freedom, and they get to do this and they get to do that thing, and they feel like they learn the stuff, and they actually do learn the dinosaurs, they do learn the math, and so because you have it set up that way, it's a good thing. Waldorf, I'm reading some of the Waldorf thing, and actually it seems like with Waldorf, they have sort of they have, you know, a set curriculum. Now, I was understanding it that it was complete freedom, and they would push you towards what it is that you wanted to do. So you're free to do whatever you want to do, but you can only, you know, you had to do something, and they would push you. They didn't want to break you, but they would stretch you. Now, the Reggio Emilia, it's a city in Italy, and the Reggio Emilia school, what they taught was that every children has 100 languages. And so they have 100 ways that they can express themselves. So Reggio Emilia, they have, you know, 100 different languages, 100 different ways to express themselves, and also the Reggio Emilia way was games. They put value with games. So with creative play, with games, with interacting with kids, you learn that way too. So you can turn, you know, like the war game and the political games, we had to write about the politics. And I remember this one lady really talking right in deep about how, you know, I had sacrificed myself and how I kind of like threw a curveball in the game, and made really good comparisons and a really good analysis about the game and the, you know, what had gone down at Dr. White's class at Xavier University. And those are the only events. I can only think of like just a handful of events or activities that we had done as a class that is actually productive, but really most of my education was just about following orders and doing what the people had said, the authority figures had said, not about respecting each other, not about following your own heart and your own dreams. So Reggio Emilia, Montessori, they're for children, but they give you the idea that there's, you know, there's other ways and there's other types of education out there. Montessori is incredible because it sets up the environment. You let the environment dictate what the children want to learn, and even though it's an enclosed thing and you only got limited choices, really the old kids need to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? So I feel like once you got those basics down, then it should be just fun, creativity, innovation. Do what you want to do. Make movies, play games, play baseball, get into politics, lobby your government, write a letter, you know, learn how to do a pogo stick, learn different talents, learn how to weld. The sky is the limit, but you need to know that these things are available, right? And then find out if you eventually want to start thinking about getting a job and moving your career, what places make money, what's an engineer, what things do you need to do in order to become an engineer. I was in U.S. history class, and I was having to memorize all these things about U.S. history, but since I'm going to be a U.S. history teacher, that's right up my alley. So I love that stuff, okay? And I did really well in the test, but I couldn't understand the other students who weren't going to be U.S. history teachers. So they're sitting there just had to memorize all these things. They weren't talking to anybody else. It was a very lonely, isolated experience. And this one girl goes, I know it all, blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of like, oh, you don't know my name, right? And actually, God, you want to have a test that everybody in public education will fail? Just ask them what their classmates' name are. Go into college. What are your classmates' name? I don't care about them. It don't even matter, right? They only give a crap about their oppressor, everybody else. There's this big-haired woman at my hip-hop class. She sat in the front of the class every time I would speak. And there's a violence, the politics of violence class, where I actually saw the reading list, and that's where I got Paulo Freire. Also, the Malcolm X debate club, the Tiffany, which was a really nice woman, and I feel bad that I couldn't stand up to. Maybe it was Tiffany, but not the main coach. There was two Tiffany's, but the mean Tiffany and a nice Tiffany. But the mean Tiffany was no good. She was absolute dog shit. But the other one, she would give me, you know, Paulo Freire and had me read this stuff, and it blew my mind. Where am I going with this? Yeah, so I got the reading list from these people, so that's where I had learned the stuff. I don't know. So, okay, Reggio Emilia, there was games, there's 100 different languages, there's 100 ways that children speak to each other, so you can speak in English, you can speak with body language, you can do interpretive dance, you can do basketball, you can do hip-hop, you can do sign language, right? You can do just a million ways. There's 100 different languages, so if children have 100 languages, we all have 100 languages, so automatically I think differently. We have 100 languages, so let's try to develop our communication skills. Two people, twins, right, they have like really good connections. They can talk to each other, but there's some times when they cannot express to the other person what it is that they're actually thinking. So there's some ideas that are sort of encapsulated and can never be gotten to. But so that's why we have to expand all the different ways that we can communicate, so that way we can truly understand and actually pay attention to what's going on, and we can understand one another. The creative abilities and the learning ability of games. Reggio Emilia also teaches us about that. So a game, turn everything into a game. Turn U.S. history into a game. You could always do a trivia type of Jeopardy game. You could always do that, right? Separate them into teams, ask the questions, and then, you know, write them down, or have them write it on, or have a quick recall. You do half of it. Half of a quick recall to see if they can just say it, blurt it out loud. Whoever blurts it out loud, you know, gets the point, and then that's it. They just get bragging rights, and then they wind up learning stuff throughout the whole time. So you got games. You can turn anything into a game, anything you want to teach into a fun game. That's how you make anything fun, really, make it into a game. Montessori, it talks about the environment, how important the environment is, how you can sort of structure things to where people choose or feel like they're choosing to do the thing, and because they choose, that makes the learning process so much more. I took this, oh yeah, the lady with the big hair. I took this other black music class, and he almost ruined hip-hop and Tupac for me, because he just made it do this, learn this, listen to me, I'm the man, who cares what you have to say. He also lied. Here's extra credit. You told me extra credit. No, I didn't. You're a liar. So he did. You can't ever ruin it, but he made it a chore. He made black music a chore, and he made it no fun whatsoever. And so I was talking about this big-haired woman who she had slammed her fist on the desk when they had said my name. So she was just going to be, she sits in the front of class. She doesn't care about anybody that's in the class. She only cares about kissing the teacher's butt. And because I was somebody that would make, you know, I would say smart stuff in class, she hated me because she wasn't the smart one in class no more. She wasn't the one that was like, oh, you're the brightest one. We all defer everything to you. No, woman, you're a Uncle Tom kiss ass, okay? She would sit in front of class. She had big hair. I was watching a movie, and a lot of us couldn't even see the movie because she didn't care about anybody. She sat in the front of class because, fuck all y'all, I'm in the front of class, and you guys are behind me, so smell my farts and, you know, and kiss my ass. And it was totally obvious. I want to be a teacher, so if I'm the one in front of class saying, okay, we're going to learn this and learn that, she's kissing my ass, but because I'm sitting next to her, I'm getting that horizontal violence. So there was that competition where we're all competing against each other, but that's such horse crap, because we're not communicating whatsoever. In fact, we're trying to yell over each other, we're trying to outsmart each other, and we're only talking to the professor, and half the time the professor is barely listening to us anyways. I remember another woman who had sort of, in Jared Neal's class, who had kind of crapped on me. I was sitting there saying, let's cut out the outlines. We had to do outlines on each one of the chapters, and I was saying, let's cut it out. Then I was like, let's vote on it. Democracy, democracy. And then she got mad. She goes, do you do this in all your classes? Do you do this in all your classes? And she fought against me, and she got the whole class to keep on doing outlines over and over again. So, you know, people judged me. They sat there and didn't like me. I tried to get those outlines cut out, and she spoke up against it, and she killed it. Nobody else jumped in on this. And so when she was sitting there handing the outlines to the teacher, she like tried to smile to him, and then he was oblivious, didn't even pay attention. So she basically doubled the work for the entire class, made us all do these ridiculous outlines that we had to do, and then she wanted to at least get some acknowledgement, some sort of smile back, and he didn't even pay attention to her. Yeah, so fuck her. But so that's sort of the competition when we have 100 different ways of speaking to each other. Greg Lichty was a Democratic candidate, and he was a genius. I'm so glad actually that he ran, because he opened my eyes to how he says when him and his wife talk, there's so many ways to disagree with things that they have to really sit and genuinely kind of listen to each other. And sort of there's a push and pull factor, and because they love each other and care about each other, they actually want to know what's going on. But it's not guaranteed. It's not always guaranteed to be like that. And so the way he has explained how just talking to somebody that you love can be a struggle. You know, if you're trying to talk to people that just don't even want to listen, there's no communication. There's no actual real communication that's happening. And so if we have 100 languages, if by developing those 100 languages, that enables us to be able to find out all the different ways that we can communicate with one another. So that's the Reggio Emilia way. There's more to it than that, and I'm going to actually get into, I guess I will try to dedicate a video to each one of them, really just opening up web pages and sort of reading. I mean, I got a Waldorf Wikipedia page here, so I'm going to read a little bit about that. That's how I'm going to end this thing. And then, okay, so I'm going to keep on going. So then you got homeschooling. Right, that's obvious. That can really go any which way. It depends on the quality of the teacher, of the parent. That could be brainwashing and indoctrination. or it can be actually an effective way to sort of, get your kids some freedom. Homeschooling, how you get homeschooling accomplished is you play ball with the Board of Education and you compile a portfolio that is comparable to the curriculum that they would learn. So the school says, well, in order to get a graduation degree, say for, I don't know, 6th grade, so for 6th grade they have to at least be proficient, to this standard in math. They have to know their multiplication tables, they got to know this type of history, and they need to know this thing. So they dictate what the curriculum is, and then by the end of the year, you show them a portfolio of all the work that they had done. And if they can show that they had comparable amounts of material that they had learned, then they have to pass you. And so that's brilliant. It's smart. Like I said, it shouldn't be. I don't know. Maybe Jean-Jacques Rousseau says to protect your babies, so maybe you should homeschool them for 12 years, the Jean-Jacques Rousseau way. Or you could use it as sort of a backup plan. You put them into public education, and if it's not working, if they're too rebellious, or if the teachers are just too, don't give a crap, or they're not really teaching anybody, then you can sort of have it sort of as a, a backup plan. So homeschooling, it totally depends on how good the parent is. There's an argument about university education that if we didn't have university education or schools, then we would only be as smart as our parents. So that's actually good. I mean, high schools have so many different teachers, so many opportunities. And if we had vouchers and if we had charter schools, then that would actually increase the public education's sort of competitiveness to keep the students in the chairs. That's how they get paid, by every student that goes to the school. So they get paid by the attendance. They don't get paid by actually making productive, good citizens. So only if the people come into their classrooms. If you have a Sudbury model school, which is cheaper, $5,000 versus $8,000 to $9,000 for a public education, if you had a voucher, you would be saving the state money, and you would be giving a real education. You would actually have a real, authentic, genuine education, right? But if you have the voucher program, that would actually increase the public education to sell their product, to sell the school. Come to our school because we will offer this opportunity, that opportunity. Now it's not like that. Now it's compulsory. The state forces you to go to school, and then once you're in class, you have to do what they tell you to do. So they never convinced you. That's like a product. It's like being forced to buy a product that you don't even want to buy, right? Everybody complains about Obamacare, but what about like auto insurance, or what about, the compulsory public education? They're forcing you to go there, and then they're forcing you to sit there and listen to the totalitarian fascism. They're not being taught solidarity. They're not being taught, money or politics or civics or Karl Marx. They're not teaching any of these things. They're teaching a very rudimentary style. They're not experts in their fields. These are general education teachers, and really the era of the rock star educator is going down. They're useless. They're not teaching anything of value. All they're doing is they know how to run a classroom, right? And run a classroom is you're willing to be mean and willing to use polite, socially acceptable oppressor tactics, right? I can't say, sit down, you stupid ass bitch. I can't yell at a kid and say something like that, but I can say, sit down or I'm going to call your parent. Now, the statement and the tone is still the same, right? I'm still talking to them like they're inferior and like they're nobody, but I'm allowed to threaten to call the parents. I'm allowed to threaten to send them to ISAP or take away their grades or use, all these different tactics in order to get them to comply. And so as long as it's socially acceptable tactics, they're allowed to use any means necessary in order to get that compliance. So homeschooling is just as good as the parent is as a teacher. So homeschooling, since we're allowed to homeschool, that should raise the bar for the public schools to say, we offer all these things, so why don't you come to our class. Khan's Academy. Khan's Academy is genius, okay? This is where I stole this idea, okay? So it's not, Freedom School isn't just my idea. I'm putting out all these different classes, and I'm hoping one of the classes will catch. I have the study of revolutions. I think that'll be a really good class, and I wanted to do Howard Zinn's, the American Revolution, because I want to do the entire history of Howard Zinn. That's my U.S. history perspective, learning the history of the oppressed. I'm not going to be like Julie Chancellor defending the oppressors. I will talk about history is made up of us, the working class people. We're the ones that are the memorizers. We're the ones that keep legacies alive. And if we're not actually learning what had happened, I mean, my God, there's so many things that are happening, and it seems like there's no solidarity, or we just forget about it, or we're just all individuals and we don't care, right? Khan's Academy is this guy who just sits there and he'll do like algebra lessons for an entire year. And you'll sit there and you'll go through each algebra lesson and you'll learn all these different concepts and these different ideas. And so an administrator could, it's all online, okay? And he uses like a smart board that he writes on. So he writes on like the smart board, and you'll see like the X plus 2 equals Y, and you'll watch it on the screen. So you can follow along, take your notes, and you can memorize what they're doing, and then they have practice things for you to be able to do. So he has all the lessons are already provided online, and all it takes is an administrator to sit there and like sort of push you along the class with it. So you'll have to like follow all 30 classes or all 30 videos to say that you passed the class, but you have to pass the test. And the administrator just makes sure that you do each class. If it seems like you're struggling with lesson 5 or something, then the administrator comes in and helps you in order to get you to it. But really all the administrator does is just make sure you watch each one of these online classes of a Khan's Academy. So Khan's Academy is teaching all the lessons, and actually it's genius. Instead of having a teacher get up there and talk about algebra every year, day in and day out, to all these kids, day in and day out, all he had to do was one time. And now it's online for anybody who wants it to learn it to be right there. There's lots of online classes like that, actually. You can learn languages. You can learn, there's Yale courses. There's Harvard level study courses, right? And if education is so important, how come we don't get together and educate ourselves? We don't do that. Teachers don't do that. The students don't do that because education itself is not valued. It's the brainwashing. It's the job. It's the paid position. It's the career opportunity. It's the compulsory being forced to be in the class. So Khan's Academy, that's kind of like, that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm having all these free lessons so anybody can pick up these lessons and just learn if they want to. They're also used for inverted classrooms. So when I go to like these classes right here, I'm teaching teachers and the general public 11 different ways of alternative education. Okay, so this is I'm teaching a year's worth or a semester's worth of material here. And I'm having like, you know, hour-long lectures for each one of these. And really, I'm all over the place, but these are the main things. No black schools, Waldorf schools, Reggio Emilia, Montessori, Summerhill, homeschooling, Khan's Academy, Sugata Mitra, Anarchist schools, vocational schools, St. John's, and self-education. Know about all those 11. I mentioned something about Jean-Jacques Rousseau and how people are being persecuted because they want to talk about freedom, right, and talk about how the Native Americans were actually good and the civilized people were not good, right? That's why he got persecuted. And then Francisco Ferrer-y-Guardia did the same thing. He had a freedom school and he was persecuted. Hopefully in America, I'll be able to be a hero, or I'll be, like, not a hero, but a smart person and get paid for it. I won't be shot or won't be pushed into exile. That's what Spalding University is trying to do to me. They're trying to ruin me, right? They sabotage my educational career because they want me to submit. You will submit. You will be a slave. Sit down, get on your knees, and kiss our butts. No, I will never submit to you all. I will never be your slaves. That's all you all wanted from me, and that's all I felt, and that's all you all cared about. 100% compliance. That's what Teach Like a Champion is all about. Okay, so Sugata Mitra School and Cloud Anarchist schools might not even have time actually to get to the Waldorf thing. So Sugata Mitra, he came up with this computer, this hole-in-the-wall experiment. He put a computer in a wall in Pakistan or India. These dropout kids or young kids who weren't in school went up to the wall, started playing with the computer, started figuring this thing out, and that's it. And that's it. He filmed this for about a week or two, and eventually the kids started talking to other kids. He kept on pushing things, and within a week or two, they had each had their own email accounts. They had Facebook. They had learned enough English to where they could use, you know, the online programs. So they knew enough English. They were basically functionally literate when it came to computers. They taught themselves. They played this really boring math game that was provided. You know, they had found a boring math game that they were playing with. So if I was a teacher and I said everybody play this boring math game, they probably wouldn't have done it. But since they came across the boring math game on their own, they were enjoying this math game and they were learning at the same time. So what that teaches is that education is self-organizing and self-emergent. Because of Sugata Mitra, we learned that the teacher in the classroom, especially a rock star teacher that just doesn't care about anybody or anything, the teacher can only stop education from happening. Education will happen regardless. Education happens regardless if there's a teacher or not. As long as you got a computer and as long as you got people that's playing on the computer and willing to dialogue and communicate with each other. So education will happen unless there's a teacher. A teacher can only stop the education. So let's not stop the education anymore. Let's back off, be least intrusive. We can direct them, we can administer, but instead of actually saying, all right, shut up, kids, sit down and listen to what I say because I got all the information and I'm the smartest person in the world, we could actually have schools that sort of are self-organizing and self-emergent. You could probably do the exact same thing. Give, I don't know, 100 kids a building with a bunch of computers and say, do what you want. And just film it, and then you can use that research for whatever it is that you want to do. But that is the same experiment, only on a massive scale. For a year, just let the kids run the building, run the computers, and see how that works. Now, it'll probably be some sort of, Lord of the Flies, so that's why when you do add staff, and when you do add teachers to this model, then all you have to do is just make sure they're not fighting. That's it. That seems to be the biggest issue, is don't fight, don't be stealing, don't be breaking the property, and do what you want. As long as you're not hurting anybody and stealing and breaking stuff, then education will happen. So the teacher just makes sure they don't stop education from happening, and you can make it more fun too. Come in, you're an adult, so you've been around the block for a while, so you know some things. Hey kid, check this thing out. Hey kid, check this thing out. Show them interesting and fun things that you've actually been able to go through. That's anarchist schools. That's Francisco Freire y Guardia, right? Non-coercive settings, sort of do what you want to do, but at the same time, I think that we do need some sort of guidance and directions. That's because I want to have a place in the school, and I think I have, the Constitution and democracy. I think I can bring a lot into an educational school, even one that is an anarchist school. I can, basically that's what you have to do. If you want people to listen to you, you got to say something interesting, right? You got to be able to do a little dance, do a little jig. David Miller used to do all these backflips, and he used to get everybody watching him. So what, I got to do a couple backflips, and after doing the backflips, and say, okay, civics. Who has the most power in a county? The sheriff or the judge executive? And then we start a conversation. Vocational schools, that's real education. You're actually learning a craft, right? I've gone to 2.5 years of so-called teacher training, and I don't know anything. If I went to welding and I got kicked out of welding school, at least know how to weld, okay? But I don't even know how, you know what I mean? They didn't teach me how to be a teacher. They taught me to be a sit-down, shut-up student. I showed a little bit of humanity. I want to have a conversation about having the 1855 Know-Nothing riots because I want to inspire the kids, because it's an interesting dialogue about where white people came from. I don't think white people really know who they are, where they came from, right? We're all just Americans. Well, you're Americans or you're Kentuckian. Well, which one? You're sitting there saying, well, but I'm an American. Well, are you a Kentuckian too? So which one are you? Are you Kentuckian or American or Louisvillian or a Muldrolian or Meade Countyan or Gouthie Countyan, or are you a Wildcat fan or are you a Republican? My God, there's so many ways to be nationalistic about something, right? So actually we're many nations. We're whatever nations we agree with and whichever nations we like and want to brag about. So yeah, we're not just Americans. We're Kentucky, German, Bohemian, African, basketball playing, English speaking, just go on and on and on. So vocational schools, that's the Booker T. Washingtons, you actually build skills. Really, you could probably just say vocational school is all you need, and then just back off, and that's it. So they actually are being taught trades. They can go out and get a job and make some money. Spalding University should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. They didn't teach me. I give them $50,000 to be a teacher, and they did not teach me to be a teacher. They taught me to be a sit down, shut up student. When I tried to be a teacher, they killed me. Okay, they ended my entire career. They should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. They stole my $50,000 and they gave me nothing for it. And all the other students probably think that, oh, well, I did right. I was an obedient little kiss ass, and I was able to graduate. So clearly, I am justified. No, you're only able to go through the ranks if you're a kiss ass. If you have an independent thought, you can't go through the ranks, okay? The whole point of teacher training is to brainwash you to make totalitarian fascism normalized. That's why they call it a normal school. The last two things is St. John's College and self-education, and I'm just going to end it. I'll talk about Waldorf next video. But St. John's education and self-education is... self-education is just educating yourself. I already mentioned all of them. Ben Franklin, Steve Jobs, and a lot of those people. All comedians are self-educated, right? Where they get those ideas. George Carlin, self-educated. Bill Burr, self-educated. Louis C.K., Bill Maher, go on down the line. St. John's education is absolutely brilliant, okay? It is brilliant. The love of St. John's education. St. John's education is the great books. And in the postmodern school, this is something I'm bringing into it. I think the great books, I think every 3 years. I was going to make it every year, but really to debate and discuss and come up with a whole nother list every year, I think I was going to say 5 years, but then that means somebody could like go through it and not actually have that debate. Because I feel like this is more of a high school, but it could be a university too. But every 3 years they vote for a new 100 list of great books, and the great books are the greatest ideas that have ever been written in all of Western civilization. So all the best ideas that have ever been written in Western civilization will be included in, you know, the postmodern school for the revolutionaries. And St. John's, they do this. They've already come up with the curriculum. And actually here, and this is actually, God, I can't believe this is, I'm just now showing this thing. But I love this piece of paper here. It talks about these are the students of the following teachers that will be returning to St. John's College. And so these are who teaches the St. John College students, right? You have a whole list of here, but I can't really look through it. So Galileo, Hegel, Tocqueville, Shakespeare, Homer, Swift, La Fontaine, a whole bunch of other ones. Twain, Tolstoy, Marx, Du Bois, Pascal, Virgil, Tacitus, Ptolemy, Harvey. So a lot of Romans and Greeks, right? But why are they so famous? There's who's that guy that wrote the Elements? Euclid, right? Euclid. So there's some things that like you wouldn't even think about or know, but some people eventually had to put the idea down on paper, and then those are like the most influential books. I even have one book that's about 7 of the most powerful ideas that changes the world. And so the books, every year there'll be a list of 100 great books that the Postmodern School for the Revolutionaries will publish every year, and these are the books that are the greatest ideas in Western civilization. So instead of me getting up there and saying these are the smartest ideas, what I'm saying is these people have something to say, okay? And then each generation will pass that, you know, the next 100 books down to the next generation for every 3 years, right? So every time that is voted on, then the next 3 years, those people will be learning about the 100 books that they had put down. Then they'll decide whether or not they were actually good books to learn or whether they weren't good books to learn. And so these lists completely change, right? They can absolutely change. And the way St. John's does, okay, they have the list of great books, and they'll have a set curriculum for 4 years. You got to read this book and this book for each class, and there's no teachers and there's no test. So all they want you to do, the way that they do test you, there's oral tests, there's no written test. So the way that it goes is that you'll go to classes and you'll be expected to talk about the required reading. So if you're supposed to read Mark Twain, you would go into the classroom and you would speak about those issues, and about Mark Twain, or about Euclid, or about, you know, Einstein's theory of relativity. And that's the life of a mind. That's how you get smart. You learned Einstein's theory of relativity to a point where you could criticize it. You know, well, you know, Marx. I criticize Karl Marx. People's like, oh, you have socialist visions, right? You're a Marxist. No, I'm not a Marxist. I feel like actually Marx thought that the revolution would happen in capitalist countries, but it doesn't happen in capitalist countries. It happens in poor peasant countries. Cuba, Vietnam, Bolivia. Poor peasant countries are where the communist revolutions happen. So he was absolutely, China, Russia, that's where this stuff happens, when you had lots of poor peasants, right? Maybe Haiti, maybe Kentucky. Kentucky would be ripe, but actually our median income is $40,000. So we have a poor class, but we got a middle class too. So that's just one idea. I'm able to criticize Karl Marx, right? So I'm better than Karl Marx. But Euclid or Einstein's theory of relativity. So they go to these places. They're expected to speak about these issues. They're expected to talk about the greatest thoughts that have ever been thought of in all of Western civilization, and and that's incredible. So it's intelligent. So I want to bring that into it, and then they have oral exams. So after dialoguing with their classmates and talking about the different books, at the end of the year they have a tutor. Okay, so it's not a teacher but a tutor who only inspires the dialogue between the students, and then they just kind of step back. The way the tutor test is an oral exam, and they'll just ask a bunch of different questions about the authors that they were supposed to have read, and whether listen to how articulate they are about the authors that they had read. So Mark Twain wrote the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. What did the river symbolize? Well, it was freedom. They were going to go to Cairo to get the freedom, but little did they know when they was on that river they were actually free. Euclid is the one that comes up with the elements. He's the one that comes up with the abstraction that is known as math. 1 + 1 = 2. But what is 1? What is 2? What is a 0? What is an imaginary number? Is this even real? So as long as they're able to articulate, you know, that they were able to read it, then they can pass it. So St. John's College, I dream of a St. John's College education. I want to educate my kids in the great books tradition. Not exactly the St. John's. I like that whole list. That list is actually a good start. There's actually probably more than 100 there. But, you know, every new generation is going to find out what is valuable to them and what isn't valuable. And we're, you know, the postmodern information generation. So to just stick with the classics, we're actually going to be losing a lot of things. But when it comes to morals and ethics, the golden rule has been able to survive throughout, you know, all time, and it probably always will. So Waldorf education coming up next.